Deathpixie disclaimer. This video was originally recorded in September 2024. There is swearing and profanity. Sources are listed in the description. This video is not monetized. Any ads you see provide revenue to the hosting site, not the creators. If you made it this far, geez, you have a lot of patience.
Deathpixie dancing on the lip of madness!
Welcome to Shitty PowerPoint Theater. Dignity not included.
Hello, and welcome to part 4 of Deathpixie's view on Canada as a whole. In today's frank and honest discussion, we have the electoral process, aka Elections Canada. Hi, my name is Crabsworth, and my back hurts. Along with me is the person who put together this entire slide deck, and therefore should be given supreme godlike powers akin to... I cannot finish reading this script. Please welcome Myry Witch.
Hello, everybody. All right. The last of the theory-heavy episodes. It took us a while, but we're here. Let's dive into it. So, Elections Canada, as I said before, they are a nonpartisan third-party agency that runs elections in this country.
What the hell was with the stew? I'm sorry.
What?
What the hell was with the slide dissolving into an airplane and then flying away?
It dissolved into a crane, which was the closest I could get to a goose. I'm being patriotic here.
I mean, yeah, we've got organic cranes, but cranes, they're like flapping this little paper. It's weird. Sorry.
All right, so a lot of this information comes from Elections Canada website.
Keeping the sky from falling.
Basically, yes. Canada is a representative democracy. During a federal election, all Canadian citizens who are at least 18 years old on election day can vote in their electoral district. How does this happen? So we have the dissolution of Parliament. So Prime Minister asks the Governor General to dissolve Parliament. Governor General directs the Chief Electoral Officer to issue the writs of an election, which is the formal order to tell the election officers in each riding to hold an election. Chief Election Officer issues the writs, and then Elections Canada sets up a preliminary list of voters in the returning offices. The Canada Elections Act provides for a general election to be held on a fixed date, which tends to be the third Monday of October in the fourth calendar year following the previous general election. However, the Act does not prevent a general election from being called earlier or later as long as it is no more than 5 years after the previous election. Now then we have the nominations of the candidates. So candidates can run as part of a party or as an independent candidate, which is no affiliation. To run in federal election, it is protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. How do you become a candidate? You must be a Canadian citizen. You must be at least 18 years old on election day. You cannot be a person who is not qualified as an elector, a member of the Legislative Assembly of a province or a territory, because conflict of interest. You cannot be the Chief Electoral Officer. You cannot be a judge appointed by the Governor General. You cannot be an election officer. You also cannot be a person who is imprisoned in a correctional institution. That is to be a candidate. To be a voter, there is no such restriction. All right? So people, even in a correctional institution, vote in this country. I want to make that clear. You also must submit either a nomination paper online or form to Elections Canada. Political party affiliation has been included on ballots since 1970. Next step is campaigning, which is the worst time of all for my social anxiety and for my anxiety in general. I would prefer if the election period was 30 days or less. Our election period can be from 37 days to 51 days, and it begins on the date the writs are issued and ends on the next election. I hate this period because everybody treats it like a sports game, and I get stressed out and I can't go on social media at all for the entire period. That is how I live my life, and that is why I need Regina Dentata to come in and give me a stress-free election, damn it. So there we go.
Just enjoy the sports ball.
I can't enjoy the sports ball. Also, can I just say there is no sports ball? Nobody's hitting a sports ball. Now, I bet you're about to... I have a small rant. I bet you're about to say to me, but hockey doesn't have a ball. What is a puck if not a flattened sports ball? What is a puck if not a flattened ball? There is no sports ball involved in elections.
Well,
no
technically,
balls
there's no sports balls involved in boxing, wrestling, professional wrestling.
Oh, there are balls. They're just not visible.
Well, maybe not in women's professional wrestling or boxing, though. How do you explain that?
What are the ovaries if not balls?
Ah, okay.
I never specified testicles. Shame on you, sir. Anyway, they campaign. Did you know that in the 2021 federal election, 2,010 Canadians registered as candidates?
Yeah, and congratulations to COVID party leaders Samuel, Clemens, and Beckett, Quinn, Joker, Conroy, who received a grand total of 3 votes on the ballot.
Good for them.
Including themselves. So congratulations to Thomas James Jarvis Johnson, who received 2 votes based upon himself and a spoiled vote from a drunk guy that accidentally read Thomas J. Jarvis Johnson. It's the first time it's ever happened in Canada. Congratulations to them.
Nice. Now, step 4 is actually voting. This is important civic duty. How do you get to vote in Canada? You must be a Canadian citizen. You must be a Canadian citizen, and you must be at least 18 years old on the day of election and registered to vote. We will talk about registering to vote because this is a point of contention when we compare the US to Canada, because a lot of Canadians seem to think we have the same issues, and we do not.
No.
Next, the election happens. We need to count and report the results. So the polls close. This is the time to count the ballots and find out who won. During this time, the doors of the polling station are in fact locked. No one can enter or leave until the counting is done. So the election officers are going to open up ballot boxes and count the ballots. The election officers record the number of votes for each candidate on a statement of the vote, and they record the number of rejected ballots or spoiled ballots. The ballots and other election documents are sealed in a ballot box and delivered to the returning officer. In most cases, a clear winner will emerge after the ballots are counted. Sometimes the vote count is very close or tied. If there is a tie or a close vote, the ballots need to be counted again in a judicial recount. So, if an electoral district had 40,000 votes cast, a judicial recount would be required if a candidate won by fewer than 40 votes. And by judicial recount, it means a judge is present for that. For most people, that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is watching on TV or at an election party or something, watching the results roll in across the country. Do you
think we got an election party? Where have you been to that I haven't?
Some people have freaking election parties. Anyway, that's what happens. And then finally, step 6. Parliament resumes. So the votes are counted, results announced, we know who the government will be, and we've got to bring in the new prime minister, and they will serve, and they resume Parliament. So that is the 6-step process. Now, remember what I said we were going to get back to who can vote in Canada?
I absolutely did.
So who is eligible to register and vote? So again, a Canadian citizen, 18 years of age or older on election on election day, and they do need to provide proof of identification. So that usually is established government ID, so photo ID with an address on it. The address I'm mentioning because that's pertinent for municipal and provincial, particularly municipal, that address really matters. If you don't have both, then you would there's a combination of different IDs you can bring in. All of this is on the Elections Canada website. Incarcerated persons can vote by special ballot. All right, they can in fact vote. So typically you get a voter card and you come in with your voter ID. So how does somebody get a voter card? So basically, Elections Canada has access to Canada Revenue Agency, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Why is that important? Because if you are you can become a Canadian citizen. And this is the government body that's going to know the moment that you've become a fully fledged Canadian citizen. Driver's licenses, they're the big one. There's also vital statistic agencies, as well as information from electors when they register to vote or to update their registration. So at any time, if you don't get your voter card, you can go to an Elections Canada office, go to their website first. They have it listed out really easy. You can call them to make sure you're showing up with all the appropriate paperwork. If you need translation services, you usually just have to ask for it and specify what language you need. But regardless, it's all there, black and white, available to you. You go in and they'll register you and you will continue to get a voter card. Because their information is tied to things like CRA, etc., that's where they tend to get the address changes for people. But again, if you've changed your address recently, they won't have that information. So you would go in to Elections Canada office. Those are the permanent offices, not the polling stations, and update your information if you know an election's coming up recently. And all of this is managed through the National Register of Electors. So again, it continuously updates and adds people. If you were missed or moved, you need to be a Canadian citizen, aged 18 or older on election day, and provide acceptable proof of identity and address. So that it would be a government issue photo ID, passport, driver's license, birth certificate, etc., etc. But those are the major ones. Now then, obviously this database has oversight associated with it. So yes, they do check the information. All right. They can't check everything name by name, but they are checking the information. So there we go. So how to vote? There are several ways to vote in Canada. You can vote on election day in person at the polling station. You can vote at an advanced polling day. That's what I tend to do. Takes my stress away. You can vote at any Elections Canada office. You can also vote by special ballot, which is by mail. I've met a lot of people where voting by mail has really opened things up for them because for various reasons, they might be out of the country for work and stuff like that. And you have your hand up. Yeah,
I do. It also works out if you have accessibility concerns for the actual office itself.
Yeah, totally. I think because I grew up in the most urban center in Canada, so it's weird for me when I go out and about in like other areas and I'm like, why haven't you updated this? Why wouldn't you, like, okay, you have stairs, but don't you have like your transportable ramp that you bring in? Okay, you have this. No. Don't you have like this that you blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's like, no, because smaller population, they don't view it as a priority. And so that's another thing that mail-in special ballot can do. The most common way to vote is in person at a polling station. On average, Elections Canada has 20,000 polling stations across Canada during an election. For voting, you vote in secret and you have the right to choose your preferred candidate free of anyone else's influence. So that's why you won't, they'll, I've seen this before, oddly enough. They'll separate couples or families who seem to think that they can all just go behind the little like baffle and do it. No, you can't. You can't do that. There's a lot of tools and services available. I always recommend to people, if you have special accessibility needs, or if, like Crabsworth, you're in a smaller community, call ahead and get your information and, consider that special mail-in ballot. It can be a lot easier and reduce stress for you. Proof of identity.
It's how I voted in the last 2 elections.
Yeah. Proof of identity, voter card, valid photo ID. If you do not have a voter card, you go with your photo ID and proof of address to register at an Elections Canada office. Elections Canada office is different from polling office. They can be the same. They can run a polling office, and often do, out of an Elections Canada office. But you have to make sure you're going to the actual Elections Canada office to do that, because that's where the more permanent staff are who know how to do those things. There are so many volunteers involved in election. It's crazy. So I'm specifying this because it's like, I want to make sure that you go to the right person. All right. So elections in provinces and territories. I thought you'd like this picture. One thing to note, they are fairly similar. It's the same process. We have the dissolution of parliament, the writs of an election, the nominations of the candidates, the campaigning, the voting. Most, if not all, as far as I'm concerned, provinces or territories follow the same standard. You must be a Canadian citizen. You must be at least 18 years of age or older on election day and registered to vote. If you are not registered to vote, you would go to, say, Elections Ontario office, Elections Alberta office, Elections Quebec office. With provinces and territories, you must be a resident of the province or territory. So that is the additional thing, is you have to be a resident and have proof of being a resident if you're not already registered with a voter card. Counting in the results, it's the same process with the doors locked and then Parliament resumes. So it's very straightforward. None of it does actually have a couple additions, which we spoke about before. So due to their smaller population, they do actually vote on the District Education Authority, the Alcohol Education Committee, liquor plebiscites, and general plebiscites. And what's a plebiscite? It is a direct vote by the public on an important question. So it's that question through a secret ballot. If you're talking, you're on mute. Oh, awesome. Oh, I see. We're singing the song. Anyway, I think you'll like this next picture. So next,
Yay! Yay!
So municipal and regionally. So none of it. Remember how I said they have a smaller population? Elections, none of it actually handles the municipal elections. So that's a note. The Municipal Elections Act does not require the process of going to the Crown and dissolving. So it actually sets out a 4-year cycle, which means municipal elections are in fact regularly scheduled. There's none of that, there's not that 1-year window like you see with federal. It also outlines other elections processes, and it does relate back to provincial and territorial acts as well as the federal act and the charter. So everything is relating back to that charter. Voting tends to be for councillors, mayors, and education trustees. Additional positions can be voted for, and you usually see that in very rural areas. Indigenous are by a case-by-case basis. As I said before, they typically vote for council members and chief, and they can vote for additional members as well. They can also vote for their regional, provincial, territorial, national equivalents if they want. And I mentioned that before as well. You have to be a resident of the municipality. You cannot go to a different municipality and vote. You have to be a resident of that municipality. And then regionally, it varies. It varies where you are. You might end up voting. It might just be an appointed thing. It might be part of somebody's job duties.
Yep.
That's all.
Now, there is an exception at play. In most cases, yes, you need to be a resident of that municipality or region. If you are, let's say, a university student who is living within Waterloo or Toronto or Windsor, where have you, but you're from a small town, you may choose to be part of whatever riding you are currently residing in, or your original home address, if you still have it.
That's true. So yeah, there is an exception. There's also the whole thing that I didn't go into here are Canadian residents who reside internationally. So that's a thing as well. So judicial and
shout out, by the way, to this person right here who looks like a actually I don't want to take away from this, but doesn't the person in this picture kind of look like our friend Trav from HR?
Oh my god, it totally does.
It totally does, right?
So judicial and enforcement in Canada is not elected for. I actually prefer it that way, because I am someone who I hear the community can police itself and I get my back up, because it's all well and good until you're not viewed as part of that community, and then you're up shit creek with no paddle and no legal wherewithal to help yourself. So
and then somebody gets hurt.
Yeah. So that is my personal bias. What I also want to talk about is when I say enforcement, that includes inspectors. So we have labor inspectors, long-term care home inspectors, commercial vehicle inspectors, job site inspectors, and they can be at all three levels of government. So do keep in mind, enforcement isn't just, police, military and stuff. It's also safety enforcement as well, and inspections. So we do not vote for this stuff. They're appointed or they're earned positions. And typically when it's appointed, there's a committee involved, or a panel. And I do have a side note about Canada. So we have CSIS, which is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which was established in 1984. They are the Foreign Intelligence Service and Security Agency of the Federal Government of Canada. They are responsible for gathering, processing, analyzing national security information from around the world and conduct covert action within Canada and abroad. They report to the Minister of Public Safety, and they are subject to review by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency. They have no law enforcement function. They focus on intelligence gathering overseas. We have the RCMP, who are the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They were established in 1920. They are the National Police Service of Canada. They are an agency of the Government of Canada. It also delivers police services under contract to 11 territories and provinces, as well as over 150 municipalities and 600 Indigenous communities. Today, these are under contract, typically with the community, mostly because they might be too small to govern on their own, or because I don't know, it's to avoid infighting. And that's again why you're seeing it in smaller municipalities as well. It's to avoid infighting because, well, Bill is your brother, so of course he's going to take your side. So it's to try and avoid that kind of infighting is the principle of it. They're colloquially known as the Mounties, or La Police Mountie. They are not contracted in Ontario or Quebec. Ontario and Quebec have their own provincial police force, and then typically the municipalities take care of their own, or they are utilizing that provincial police force. They do interprovincial and international crime, and they also do border integrity in conjunction with CBSA, which is Canada Border Services. So CBSA also works with Ministry of Health, Agriculture, Immigration, Transportation to look for issues related to that. RCMP, they're looking into human trafficking and national security issues as well as organized crime. So that's how they work with them. They also oversee Canadian peacekeeping missions involving the police. I have my own feelings about that because I find that they are often abused by various corporations in this regard, which I don't like. They also manage the Canadian Firearms Program and the Canadian Police College. Fun little note about that. Ontario and Quebec have their own provincial police force. They have their own police college. They don't utilize the RCMP Police College. And this is very notable when we start talking about Stephen Harper. Sorry, I do want to correct myself right now. When I said that Toronto and everything else was amalgamated into the GTA, I forgot, into City of Toronto, then GTA. I forgot to say that was Mike Harris who did that, not Harper. Anyway, Harper did the G20 convention in Toronto and then very quickly switched it from the RCMP-led operation in a controlled environment to let's just do it in the city with the police. The police didn't have enough resources and they outsourced policing to additional provinces who were trained differently. And very notably, when an investigation about issues that occurred with that, a lot of the officers who took off their badges and their names were in fact from those other provinces that contracted out. So just an interesting point of fact there. And then finally, we have the Canadian military, which is CAF for Canadian Armed Forces. So that's Army, Navy, and Air Force. So what did they do? They do things like defending our borders. They do a lot of search and rescue into rural areas. Also, Canada tends to only really get involved when something is sanctioned by the United Nations. They also are a huge part of delivering supplies to remote regions, monitoring fisheries and oceans, forest fire, and flood response. And they do and like I said, they'll also do international aid as well as enforcement, but again, sanctioned by the United Nations. Interesting thing, there is the Canadian Rangers, who are a subcomponent of the Canadian Army Reserve, who live and work in remote, isolated, and coastal regions of Canada. And they provide light-equipped, self-sufficient mobile forces to support Canadian Armed Forces' national security and public safety operations with Canada. So you often see that during forest fire flood season, where Indigenous communities who have a trusting relationship with the Canadian military and the Canadian government will prefer to have assistance provided by the Canadian Rangers rather than a provincial force and rather than the RCMP. So there you go. Just a side note to notice, in more cities and moving outward, emergency social workers are also being paired with police in different municipalities and regions in response to mental health care crises. And there are a lot of hospitals that fund basically a 911 service for mental health crises. The reason why police get involved and the reason why I don't argue with it is because when someone is having a crisis, it can get violent. Not all the time, but it can. And, you know, it's a lot to ask a social worker to risk getting hurt. So I'll leave it at that. I'll say that's why it's there. It's definitely an argument between protecting the worker versus mental comfort of a potential patient. And we're not going to get into that, but just know we do recognize that it's a thing. So why all this time on voting? Well, there's a lot of apathy in our country. Did you know that? There's a lot of apathy. Now,
I definitely did not know that.
Yeah, so
Canada is known for record high voter turnouts. Did you not know?
Right. I do have a disclaimer. Obviously, if there's a medical reason why a person cannot vote, such as severe cognitive issues, severe medical issues, like a coma, extreme extenuating circumstances, this is not directed to you. We are talking about apathy, all right? This voter apathy actually causes extremist and discriminatory governments to come into power. They take advantage of low voter turnout, and that's how they get in. We've seen this before. We've seen this across multiple countries with similar voting processes. We've seen this in countries with different voting processes. It's a fact that I am stating. We see this happen. It's not conjecture. We see it. So you cannot tell me that 60% of the voting populace of Canada who did not turn up last time at an election was all in palliative care, was all unable to get on a bus, were all unable to get their mail-in ballot. You can't tell me that 60% of the voting population fell into those categories. So I hear a lot of, I don't know if I'm registered. I just told you how to tell that. I just told you how to do that. I don't know who to vote for. Guess what? There are multiple effing websites out there where you can answer questions. It takes 15 minutes. You answer questions on the major party platforms, and it will tell you which party aligns with your opinions. You can go online and you can find out where you align politically on the spectrum. My personal favorite is a quadrant one that separates social and financial, for example. It's stressful. Of course it's stressful. I'm insanely stressed out every time there's an election. So stressed out, especially today. But I still do it. I don't have time to do research. Bullshit. You don't have time. You can go to the independent press that only reports facts. You can go to each of the major political parties' websites and read their platforms. That's 20 minutes.
Or you could do what I do. Get some popcorn. Eat said popcorn and watch the Bloc Québécois guy relent about why he's at any multi-party debate.
Yeah. It's 20 minutes of scrolling on Reddit, guys. You have 20 minutes. Come on. You know you do. I don't like the options. Then do a protest.
Spoil your ballot.
Yeah, spoil your ballot. I don't care. My party won't win, so why bother? A, so you're counted. B, spoil your fucking ballot so it's counted.
Well, to be fair here, to those people who say, my party person won't win, so why bother? My party person has never won.
So as far as I'm concerned, y'all are lazy. I don't care how harsh this sounds. We already said our disclaimer and who we're talking to. You're lazy. And to be perfectly frank, most of you come from a long line of people who never had the chance to vote. Unless you come from a land-owning noble family, you come from a long line of people who had to fight, die, and be put into various institutions to have that right. And quite frankly, it is disrespectful. And it just gets me so angry because literally voting is the bare minimum. It is the bare minimum that you can do. And it upsets me. And if you're not voting for yourself, vote for someone else who needs it. I will never forget a news anchor in the United States who was almost crying on camera, begging people to please vote, because if a certain person gets in, him and a bunch of other vulnerable, because he was a person of color, him and a bunch of people like him are going to have a very hard time. So please vote for them. There's no reason not to vote. Like I said, we are in a country where you can spoil your ballot and have it counted. So, that's mean. But yeah, remember, the assumption always is, if you didn't show up to vote, the assumption is, well, you're not mad enough to complain, and therefore you don't care, or you don't really mind what's going on right now, so you're okay with it, right? Politicians don't read your Twitter feed. Politicians don't go on TikTok and watch what you're saying. And I can say this because when you go on TikTok, are you seeking out people that you don't know and you don't like? Or are you letting the algorithm do the work for you and only looking at your friends and family? So, anyway, yeah, go out and fucking vote. I don't know if you have something to add.
Oh, heavens to Betsy, no. I am a lot more sympathetic to those who can't vote. However, there are many options for those who can't or don't want to vote. We want to heavily stress advanced polling for those who may have accessibility issues getting into those spots and may feel unwelcome to some ridings. There are mail-in ballots available. make sure to do that in order to protest that. Or if you're really feeling apathetic towards the candidates, please spoil your vote.
Yeah.
I don't care how you do it, and you could spoil it spectacularly if you really wanted to. I don't know. Instead of one person, put in all of them and make it a giant bunny. Write in Bugs Bunny. Do what Myry did one year and write in Seth MacFarlane.
I'm never living this down.
There are many, many ways to show how much you cannot stand the current system. And quite frankly, I am of the belief that if we were to have a spoiled ballot in either a majority or minority position, it would cause electoral reform, which I believe some people who don't vote really, really want.
But again,
so if you want things to change, be a part of said change.
Yeah, and like I keep emphasizing, it needs to be quantifiable.
Yes.
That's the big thing. It needs to be quantifiable. That's what this spoiling your ballot does. It is quantifiable. That is what voting for a protest party or a protest candidate does. It is quantifiable and sends a recorded message.
Vote for the rhinos.
Anyway, we are in fact different from the United States.
Yay, Homer!
So there is kind of no agreed standard for election, including registering in all the states. So it is a crapshoot in the U.S. how you're going to do this. Their country's electoral system is highly decentralized.
Decentralized?
Yeah, decentralized. I'm sorry. The U.S. Constitution does set parameters for the election of federal officials, and there are state laws, not federal, that regulates most aspects of the elections in the U.S., including primary elections, including the eligibility of voters beyond a constitutional general definition, including the running of each state's electoral college, as well as the running of each state and local election. So all of that is in fact administered by individual states, with many aspects of the systems operating delegated to a county or a local level. So there is no one body that does this and does it consistently. They also change their standards not just for who's qualified for vote, but how to register. And this idea that you have to register every single time, it's stressful. It leads to lengthy lines and lengthy issues. It's very difficult for me to find information on Indigenous groups for the US. I tried. It was difficult for me to find any clear, detailed information. And who do they vote for? They vote for the president via the Electoral College. They vote for their leaders, like their mayors, their representatives, Congress, governor, legislature. Small area police chiefs are voted for. Sheriffs are voted for. State attorney and judges. I want you to think about that's a popularity contest. Like district attorneys and county attorneys, again, population contest there. And we've seen trouble happening, as well as school trustees. So there is a major difference. Now then, that brings me to my final point. Thank you, everybody. That brings us to the end of the theory-based episodes. It was definitely a long haul to get here. I am going to invite you, Crabsworth, if you have anything to add to that.
So the important thing to take away from this is the theory forms the basis of how we view prime ministers in the future. If you can understand where Myry went off on tangents, it's probably a good idea of where our political leanings are. So please don't ask us in the comments or track us down or email us on deathpixiecollective@gmail.com asking what your leanings are, because you probably already know. The other thing that I think needs to be stated here is you guys are rock stars. This was 4.5 hours, 5 hours of things that were necessary to understand our system. That was basically just going through our audience. If you skipped around, I can totally understand why. But please just do yourself a favor. If you want to be educated on Canadian politics, take a look at our slide deck. Take a look at this presentation. Listen to us on Spotify. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but if you want education, I think this is probably the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen in my life. Jeff Probst or no Jeff Probst.
I put a lot of research into this.
Yeah.
And finally, you know who appreciates our efforts here?
Jerry.
Jerry in Kazakhstan. We love you.
We love you, Jerry.
We love you. And the next episode, yes, I'm tackling all the theory there, but Crabsworth is stepping in with the shade, and we are talking about the prime ministers, every single one of them. So
Yeah!
get ready for that.
Let's do it!
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody!
Hey, this is Trapdoor Crabsworth for deathpixie. If you liked our content, please like this video and subscribe. And if you want to see more, just check out our links in the description. Do it. Do it or Myry will kill you.